Jason V. Brock is a filmmaker and a longtime Facebook friend of mine, and I really like his work. We've got so many projects coming from him. He's a veritable font of goofy, nerdy information. I don't know. I should say that. Yeah, you are. I love your work. The AckerMonster Chronicles is a Forrest J. Ackerman story, a film that has just been released, and also I'm a huge fan of Charles Beaumont from the Twilight Zone and the scripts and stuff that he wrote, and I just think this documentary you did. Was it The Short Life of Twilight Zone? What's the title of it actually?
Yeah, it's Charles Beaumont, The Short Life of Twilight Zone's Magic Man.
Now, the thing I love about your documentaries is that you're able to sort of personalize them a little bit. I mean, because especially with the Twilight Zone, you were able to just sort of get into the mindset of Charles Beaumont, I thought. And I thought that was really a cool touch.
Yeah, I think that I'll give you a little bit of back history here. What happened was my wife and I moved down to California for a job I had at Fuji Photo Film USA. And we lived in Long Beach, and so we decided to go to Comic-Con and see they were going to have an appearance of Bradbury, Ray Harryhausen, and Forey Ackerman there. And they were signing a book. And so I said, we have to go see them and get some things signed. And so she agreed, and I had always wanted to be a filmmaker of some stripe or other and had worked on some films doing special effects and a little bit of acting and this kind of thing in my native home of North Carolina. And this was a while back for me. I actually worked with a guy named Harry Joyner, who was a protege and partner with Earl Owensby, who did some exploitation films out of North Carolina.
Yeah.
I never met Earl. I think I may have talked to him one time, but I met a lot of strange people when I was a younger guy. I had a weird upbringing. I'll go into that a little bit, too, if you want. But what happened was, so we went down to Comic-Con. We had a good time, and I said, you know what? We're down here. And I would like to get into movies. And I told my wife, I said, her name's Sunny, S-U-N-N-I. And so I said, I want to get into doing films. And I think a good way of breaking into films is doing documentaries. And, she was pretty cool about it. She didn't look at me like, are you out of your mind? We can't go into films, because she was a long-time computer person. I was a long-time photo electronics person. And I said, I know I can do it because I've done it before. And I've done other little small things, like small documentary things where I interviewed. I was going to do a documentary on emergency rooms one time. Boy, you're getting the total scoop. Nobody knows about this. I was going to do a documentary on emergency room physicians one time. And so I did a lot of research as a 12-year-old interviewing these doctors.
Wow.
And this was in Charlotte, where I'm from. And my family was involved in the hospital industry there. And so I did that. It was fun, but I didn't get anything off the ground, so I was just a young guy. And nobody was taking me seriously, although the doctors did, because I had good questions. They said I was very prepared, all that kind of thing. And I did another interview with a guy named Robert Inman, who was a newscaster, but also a writer of some repute. And he's still a writer. He's had things on television and all kinds of things that were based on his novels and books. So that was my youthful upbringing, and that was all due to my father, James. He was a filmmaker and a writer and a graphic designer. So he kind of got me involved in all that. And
it's in your DNA. The thing, I love this.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah, I always love the aspect of like, hey, I see somebody doing something over here. That looks like it's fun. Let me figure out how I can get there. That has always been something that I like. And I love hearing stories of people just saying, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do it. That do-it-yourself attitude is something that, and it's great because we sort of being a DIY. I know it comes in phases. I look back at these books and stuff. I guess I know in the Depression there was a DIY kind of movement, and then I believe in the '60s, and we really have one now with like Make Magazine, and we got Filmmaker Magazine. Got everyone. You can do whatever you want. We're living in a time where we really shouldn't be complaining. We've got 5,000 channels of TV. We've got internet. We can, you can write a book and post it.
We should have 5,000 channels of good programming.
Right, I know. That would be a dream come true. Well, I mean, here's a chance. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity for there to be a Jason B. Brock, channel. You know, it could be like
You're just going to be an Oprah.
Yeah,
you know, and
it'd be like, no, like her is the OWN network. Yours be Pwn or whatever. You know, like
yeah, really.
It, you know, but you know, I just think you have this inquisitive nature. You say, oh, I'm interested in you know, learning about something. I'll go and interview these people. You don't really have any fear.
My wife, I'm sure she thought I was insane. She didn't let on. We got through, you know, meeting Bradbury and all that, and I said, well, there are 3 guys here, you know, and I said, Bradbury's had lots of things done on him, so he's out.
Yeah.
Harryhausen had something done on him, so I thought, he's out. That's too recent. And I said, but really nothing at the time had been done on Ackerman. This was in 2005. And there have been a few small things subsequently, but they were mainly things that kind of were about the situation around Ackerman, not necessarily Ackerman proper.
Yeah.
And even when they did delve into him, they do what I call the button stories. You know, all these guys, these older guys, and you get to talk to them and they'll have a button story.
Absolutely.
You know, like where you hit it and you mention a name and they just go on this long story tangent that they do for everybody they've ever met. And I wanted to get past that. So usually one of my strategies was to let them talk it out and then start asking the questions. So I'll get them talking for about 15 minutes and the camera's rolling in case there's something that gets going. But then after that, I start going, and then what did it mean to you, though? And how did that impact you, and what did you feel? Because talking about their interior life is what's, I think, the most important thing when you were talking about kind of getting into Beaumont's head and his physiology and his psychology. That was not easy to do because he was dead. Right. You know, there was no chance of interviewing him because he'd been dead for years. Yeah. So I thought, well, how do I do this? And what I call it is a prismatic narrative. So what I have is, and that's kind of my own idea, it's revealing by way of a kaleidoscope of his friends and loved ones, you know, what did this guy mean? Because he meant something different to everybody.
It's like a puzzle piece. I was thinking when I was watching it, you know, you get a little bit, and maybe, you know, from the sum of all those parts, you get a portrait of what he meant to everyone, or what kind of person he might have been. I mean, I know no documentary can nail someone, you know, down, you know, perfectly, but I just thought with some of the ways that you, through your editing and through the cinematography and mostly the questions, I just think, you know, I sort of knew him a little bit. I mean, I liked his writing and stuff, and I just sort of, I used to be friends with George Clayton Johnson. I'm just I just don't see him as much as I used to see him. So, you know, hanging out with those guys, you would hear these stories about him, and everybody, you know, loved him. I mean, you know, he had a lot of problems, and then you sort of find your way into it in the documentary, and I just think it's brilliant the way, you know, the way it comes across. So I'm
glad you got that much time. You know, you're echoing the sentiment of a lot of people because they say a lot of the same things. They're like, he's so real to them after they see the film, and what we did not want was a whitewashed presentation. On the other hand, we didn't want a muckraking piece. It wasn't about, you know, destroying his character or anything. It was about showing him as a true human being. And I think one of the interesting things about it, and people don't know this usually, is that Bill Nolan, who's gotten to be a good friend of mine, William F. Nolan, he knew a lot about Chuck because they were very close. He and Tomerlin and Beaumont in particular were close. But Nolan's thing is he was the last person we interviewed for that, really.
Yeah.
He may not have been the very last, but he was like among the last, you know. And George was the one that told me, you should go interview William F. Nolan. And I was like, well, wow, is he still alive?
Yeah.
And he says, he's alive, all right. He's in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, cool. Can you put me in touch with him? And he did. And that's how we met Bill. And there was a little bit of controversy around the film because Christopher Beaumont, who was a nice guy, of course, the son of Charles Beaumont, he's in the film. He and Bill don't get along. Okay.
Really?
And I'm hoping that eventually that will, you know, resolve itself. But it was a long-standing point of difficulty, and I didn't know that as we were getting involved in the film. And in fact, to get back to the original thing before we go off on the Beaumont more is we actually started the 40 documentary first. Okay, so we interviewed everybody around Forey and all that kind of stuff, John Landis, Joe Dante, all those guys. But then what happened was Mark Zicree, he kept saying, you should really interview Beaumont. And I said, do a film about Beaumont. I said, well, I'd love to do a film on Beaumont, but I heard through the, talking to all these other people that another fellow named Clay Reed was working on a film about the group in Beaumont. He says, yeah, but there's so much there.
He was going to do was it the Green Hand? Is that what is that?
Yeah, that kind of thing about the Green Hand. But the thing is, there was Mark's point was, and this is not to lay it all on Mark. I mean, I'm not blaming him for this. He just said there's more than enough information about Charles Beaumont to do more than one film. Right. And I said, okay, well, let's think of the angle. Finally, I came up with the angle, and then it would have to be all about Chuck himself. The other characters around him would be, one aspect of it, but he has got to be the centerpiece. The other fellow's film, from what I could gather, because I met him, he came over to my house a few times, and we had dinner and stuff like that, his was more about the group with no real focus on an individual, per se. And so I said, well, let's make ours about Chuck and have the group kind of flip it. And that's what we were doing. And I saw rushes of his movie, and it was good, but I don't know that it will come out because there's a lot of footage from the Twilight Zone there, and he's going to have to iron out all the licensing agreements. And he may have to recut it or something like that because that's very expensive to do. And I think that's been the main sticking point. So I hope one day he does bring it out. From the last time I heard, it's called Where No Man Walks.
Oh, okay.
But
I hope people, they're listening.
Which was actually Beaumont's last novel that he's working on.
Oh.
Is the title of it. And it's got narration by Peter Coyote and, all that kind of stuff. So it would be interesting to see, but I don't know the fate of it, and I've lost touch with him.
Well, now, Jason, wouldn't you say that if you were trying to describe someone, you trying to describe Charles Beaumont to someone who had, absolutely no idea, you'd say, well, he was a writer. He wrote for Playboy. He wrote short stories. He wrote, he started writing pretty young. But I would think the Twilight Zone probably is what most people would instantly sort of make the connection that he was hanging around Ray Bradbury, William F. Nolan, who we were talking about, who did Logan's Run, Richard Matheson. He was George Clayton Johnson. He was around all these guys. And what are some of the films that he actually worked on?
Well, he worked on a lot of movies, mainly for Roger Corman. Yeah. And that came a little bit later. He did do work for the Otto Preminger on Bunny Lake is Missing.
Oh, that's right.
Which
I saw not long ago. That's a good movie.
Yeah, and they wound up not working together, but he did work with him for a while on that script. And then he worked on the Poe films. He worked on, several of the Poe films, although one of them is not really a Poe film. It's the one about, the one based on Charles Dexter Ward. It's slipping my mind. But anyway, movie.
Would you say that?
That's the Haunted Palace. The Haunted Palace.
Would you think? The way I sort of saw him is that he was just this. It was like, like the candle being burned at both ends. He was like a meteor. It was just like this.
Yeah, I think he had a kind of a morbid disposition, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Kind of almost like, well, not as morbid as Poe, but that way that Poe was. Poe died at age 40, I believe, right? Yeah. And Beaumont was only 38 when he died. But you think about how much those guys accomplished in such a compressed period of time, and it's like they were. I don't know. It's like they felt the heat of something on their neck, to get it done before they died. And Beaumont did about 100 short stories and 3 novels and a lot of teleplays and stuff. Because he didn't just write for the Twilight Zone. He also wrote for Alfred Hitchcock Presents and all the other shows. A lot of several Western shows back in the day.
I'm surprised when I'll be watching something on TV, it's like, and it'll
Steve Caney. He wrote for Steve Caney.
Yeah, and I'll see his name pop up, and I'll go, "Wow, that's great."
Yeah, and all of them did because they were, as Bill always says, we were just guys trying to figure out how to make the rent. We didn't think that we were going to turn into the Southern California Writing School, which is kind of what it had been formerly aggregated as now, or the group, which is what they call themselves. They call themselves the group. Mm. The Green Hand is a separate thing. That was an expressly money-making venture that was dreamed up by George Clayton Johnson in particular, and he got Matheson himself, I want to say Tomerlin, I could be mistaken on that, but anyway, to go in and do pitches, okay, to executives and try to get work that way. And it was a short-lived thing because it didn't really work. Because they got the pitches, but they never got any actual sales, is what Rich Matheson told me. And so he had to bow out of that because he had a family, you know, that he needed to support. And George did too, but, you know, he was just not able to, it was not able to turn over. So the Green Hen kind of came up and then blossomed and then went down. It almost sounds like a production company name or something, but I don't have any record of that. I think it was just an informal appellation. But the way that happened, but I do want to make this one point. We didn't mean to make a movie about Beaumont.
Oh, wow.
So when we were thinking about Ackerman, and then Mark encouraged us, and then other people started saying, yeah, do Beaumont. Once we did get on that track, it fell into place so quickly that we put Ackerman on the back burner, which was just as well because Forey was still alive, and we weren't trying to, like, you know, wait until he passed away or anything. Yeah. It's just that he got weaker and weaker during the course of getting the film done because film is kind of a slow process. It's not as glacial as publishing, but it's slow. And so once we got Beaumont done and promoted and got it out there, then we were ready to turn all of our attention to Ackerman, and we did. And then that's how we got Ackerman now. And they knew many of the same people in common.
Yeah, so the AckerMonster Chronicles is the title of this documentary. And you know, was it difficult to? I mean, because you probably did this documentary. Well, I guess he still had his house, right? I mean, I guess you still went up there on what was it, Glendover or whatever that avenue was.
So we went to the mini mansion, the mini Acker mansion, because he had an unfortunate series of fortune reversals.
Right.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
And reversals of fortune. And what happened basically was he was doing very well. Then he fell in with a fan who later became the co-owner of, at the time, the rebirth of resurgence of Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Right.
And Ackerman, of course, was the editor for the original Famous Monsters of Filmland from Jim Warren, and Warren Publications. And so what happened was, once he got involved with this guy, his last name is Ferry, he wrote a book, which I did read just to get some balance and understanding, although he's not all there, I don't think.
Yeah.
But so once I did do that research and all this kind of stuff, and we went in and talked to Forey, we sort of understood better why he had to sell all of his assets and divest himself of all of his most of his collection. But he still, you know, tried to carry on and get fans. He would host fans on the Sundays and things like that. And he did that for years, practically until he passed away.
Yeah.
And we went, of course, several times. We have, I think, probably the longest interview with Forey ever. We did three separate interviews. One was about 10 hours, one shot. And then another one was like an hour pickup, and then maybe the other one was like a couple hour pickup. And they found their way in both films, you know. Of course, the bulk of the one went into the AckerMonster Chronicles, and the other one, the pickups and things were mainly about Beaumont and some things we had. They were pulling that together finally.
Now, was Forey Beaumont's agent at one point?
He was his first agent. Yeah, he was his first agent.
And then
he left. He left Ackerman, the Ackerman agency, which was Forey's company, to go to Don Congdon Associates, who was representing Bradbury at the time. And also Congdon represents, to this day, he represents Bradbury's estate, Richard Matheson, the Beaumont estate. I think he also represents John Tomerlin, and a lot of people.
Wow.
They were big.
I mean, is he actually still doing the representation, or is it like is it someone?
Don Congdon himself passed away.
Yeah, I was going to say
about a year and a half ago, I want to say. But his son, Michael Congdon, is still doing. Yeah, he's still representing them.
Because I mean, I just think about these guys. I mean, and I mean, I'm not saying I'm not an ageist or anything. And these guys are up in age.
Yeah, they're pretty old.
Yeah, and you know, I always just wonder how hard it is in a market, you know, to find an agent, find somebody to represent you, you know, that, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, you know, how does
when you're their age, like Bill's big agent for Logan's Run is a gentleman named John Silversack, and I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a very powerful agent. He's also a nice guy. I met him at World Fantasy a couple of years ago, and but he represents. He owns the company. Well, I forget his exact title. I'm going to say he's like the chairman of it. But he's also an agent, and he represents very large properties. Logan's Run is just one of several, and the company is called Trident Media Group. They're like one of the biggest agencies on earth, you know. So when you've got a big property like Logan, or you've got a big property, you know, like some of Bradbury's or any of Matheson you care to mention, I think that it's not too hard to maintain an agency.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty neat how, you know, like the resurgence. I mean, I can, just like anybody else, I can get tired of remakes or reimaginations or whatever, like reinventions. But
yeah,
you know,
I guess
but you know, I am really looking forward to the Logan's Run, you know, film, and I think that stuff coming back around is great for these guys.
Yeah, I don't think you're looking forward to near as much as Nolan and Johnson.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
They just go on and on about when they make it, when they do it. Bill's like, oh, they're going to do it any time now. Of course, that's been 17 years.
Right.
They've had that because
George Clayton Johnson's been through this before. I mean, he worked on Ocean's 11. I mean, he worked on Ocean's, you know, for Frank Sinatra, and so I don't know if he got anything out of the new stuff, but you know, he's sort of been there, seen, you know.
He got it credit.
Yeah.
I don't know about remuneration. I think they should have given George money.
Absolutely.
I don't know if they did.
Yeah.
But that's Hollywood. You know, it's all about the rights and the things. You know, they don't get residuals either for the Twilight Zone.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
you know, that at the time, residuals and things like that were not clearly understood like they are now. How that can be a powerful thing. You know, you think about Serling himself. He sold the rights to the Twilight Zone, you know, to syndication,
right,
for like a paltry sum of money by our estimations these days.
Yeah, I think it was like a buyout. I was just like, it was.
Because he was just take the whole package, and that was in the early days, of course, of television syndication as well. And now, you know, people, what they do is they try to make it to that 5-year mark minimum. That's usually when the syndication packages start kicking in. And that's what happens is they get to that mark, and then after that, the longer they go, the better. But by 5 years, you're guaranteed to get some kind of packaging deal, you know. And if you're smart, you'll be involved in the back end to where you're getting a cut of that. Now, that's probably not going to happen to a lot of writers, you know, because writers come and go.
Yeah.
But that's if you're a creator, you know, that's a good deal.
Was there anybody like while you were doing both of these projects that you just said, yeah, you know, I think my next documentary is going to be this? I mean, what is the thought process that goes into, you know, coming up with your next project?
Well, after we landed on Ackerman, I thought, well, Ackerman has been undercovered, right? You know, he has not been covered enough, and that's what drove my decision in making the AckerMonster Chronicles. And I still think that's true. I think this is a pretty complete portrait of Forey, okay? And it covers all aspects of his life that people never covered before, like his interest in Esperanto and nudism and all this kind of stuff. Beaumont, he just was kind of an obscure character because he died so young. Although he's an important figure in when it comes to weird, you know, literature and all that kind of stuff and television and early Playboy. So that was easy to do. Ackerman was a little more. Well, Ackerman too was easy to do in a way that it's sort of harder because some people were like, I had a review online where somebody said they didn't spend enough time on Famous Monsters. And I'm like, dude,
oh my goodness.
There's been like 3 other docs that cover that. I mean, ad nauseum, you know?
Right.
If you want to look at that, go see it. We covered all the factual details. We covered everything that we thought was interesting and germane about Famous Monsters. But there's no need to go on and on and on and on and on about Famous Monsters when he's got so much more colorful stuff going on, like his interest in, like his being an honorary lesbian. You know, that's far more interesting to me.
Well, yeah, I was always fascinated that, you know, he was there at the you know, the creation of Scientology with L. Ron Hubbard. He was his agent, and
his agent. Yeah.
And I remember a lot because I actually used to hang out in some capacity with Forey, and this is kind of a weird sort of way. Not as sort of the fan, but I had a friend that was doing publicity. Actually, it was my first wife. My ex-wife was doing publicity for Forey and for Ray. Actually, we had this really great. We had this one really great dinner where it was Ray Bradbury, Ray Harryhausen, and Forey, and we were at the Dresden, and she had done something for the re-release of Earth versus the Flying Saucer. So we had they all did their handprint in the Vista Theater sidewalk, and it was a really great time, and you know, hanging out and talking to him and stuff where he isn't, you know, like when he wasn't on like he normally is, when
right?
He's, you know, doing that.
That's the button phase,
right?
Kind of on.
Yeah, And so, I was asking him stuff, and I remember he told me this story, and I was thinking, like, there's no way this is real. But it was a story about, I think it was Excalibur, where it was, maybe that's not the title, but it was L. Ron Hubbard had written this book, and they wrote it, and it was just, he was on amphetamines or caffeine or something, just manically wrote this book, and I think it was called Excalibur, and Forey got it and says, I really don't know if we can sell this. This is just like, this is a huge chunk of, of a book. I don't really know if we can sell it. So they bound it up. I guess it was like Forey's idea to bind it up in metal and put a lock on it. And somebody in New York at one of the publishing houses had committed suicide. And so Forey says, hey, let's say anybody who reads this will jump out of a building and commit suicide. And they already had it, there was already someone had actually already done it. And he showed me where he had got that in. There was he got a blurb in Newsweek way back in the day on that, and I thought that's just genius, I mean,
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I just think,
but that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and just all the stuff that this guy was such a raconteur, he just
yes.
And in a lovable way. I mean, I know he did underhanded things. I always feel bad about. A lot of people don't know about the Robert Bloch thing about getting.
Yeah, we talk about that, and we have it from Forey's perspective. I talked to Ellison about Beaumont. He's in the Beaumont film, and Harlan goes on. This is strange. We were in the back of our minds thinking one day we'll do this Forey film after we finished Beaumont, because it had kind of taken on a life of its own, and. Greg Bear, the science fiction writer, told me, don't mention Ackerman to Ellison when you interview him. I said, okay. Can't we fix this? I thought. And he says, no, just don't mention it. So I didn't. And in the release, Ackerman's name was expunged and all this kind of stuff. And so we just kept mum about it. We wouldn't have lied about it, but we just keep mum that we're working on anything having to do with Ackerman, because we didn't even know if it was going to happen. We had to finish Beaumont at that point. We had switched gears and decided that we've got to finish this and see what happens first. So we go to Ellison's house. Ellison is talking and doing a great job. Then he brings up Ackerman.
Wow.
And I was like, whoop, I'm not going to say anything. And he goes on this incredibly long tirade that I've never shown to anyone, except Sonny was there. And it was humorous in a way, but it was also invective-filled, vitriolic horror show.
It's hard to believe that he could be that way.
Yeah, right. And so I broke the rule. I went against Greg's wishes, but I only had one question, and I said, after this 20 minutes or so of this, I said, I just have one thing to ask. And he said, yes. I said, did you always feel this way about Ackerman? And basically he said, yes, I have, always. And then I said, okay, moving on. And that's it. That was the discussion. I would love to have put it in.
Sure.
Some of it in the AckerMonster Chronicles, because it was fascinating, but, maybe tone it down a little bit for people who don't know Harlan.
I don't know. But, I would love to see that. I would love to see that footage.
I've sworn never to show it, because, once it's out, it's out. But it's with people that I would like to do. I've had people ask me to do other films.
Oh, yeah? Well,
this one guy said he wanted to see a documentary about Jewish science fiction writers.
Mm.
And I think that's an interesting idea, but I think it's a pretty limited appeal, And then maybe I'd expand that to early science fiction and then create like a section on writers who happen to be of Jewish lineage.
Well, here's what I was thinking. Like, I mean, do you really? I mean, now, like when you're a
that's somebody who wants to do Heinlein now, but
that's pretty. I don't know. That's pretty cool. Here's the thing: would you want to go with someone who, who's like a niche kind of market kind of thing, where there's a small but very vocal group, to do a documentary about, so that particular audience is, it's almost an easy sell, because there's nothing else out there like it, and there's a
double-edged sword to that.
Yeah.
Easy sell is one thing. Beaumont's pretty obscure, and we've done a lot to elevate his stature. And I'm pleased to say that, because now more people have known about Beaumont as a result of the Egyptian screening we had, which was well attended. And, that was where we premiered it. We've taken it all over the country, showing it. We just sold the Beaumont foreign rights to Germany.
Wow. That's great.
And that got paired up with The Intruder in Germany.
Wow.
And that's coming out on DVD. And
now, did he have anything to do?
In fact, it's already out.
Did Beaumont?
And that was with the blessing of Corman, his company. So.
Well, now the Esperanza film that William Shatner was in,
The Incubus.
The Incubus. Now was Charles Beaumont or Forey involved in that in any way?
Nah, I wonder if Forey. He's such a proponent of that, though. You'd wonder if he's not some kind of weird consultant.
Yeah,
but I don't know that he knew Shatner very well. I mean, I think he knew him some, but not like other people he knew, like Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee is somebody Ackerman also had a falling out with.
Mm. Well, and, I guess going back to the question I had about choosing your next. You're at a stage now where people are coming to you and saying, "Hey, could you do a documentary?" And I mean, that must.
I also am helping people. There's a guy who wants to do one on Robert Bloch.
Oh,
and he was asking me, how do you do this and how do you get going? I said, well, what I did was I went out and spent a lot of money garnering equipment and re-familiarizing myself how to use it. Because one thing that's great about all the equipment we used, and when we started, HD was not the standard. 4:3 regular television was the standard. But I made the decision early on, because I'm kind of a techno nut, and so is my wife, that it's going to behoove us to do 16:9 to do HD. And that's what we did. So we wound up shooting 720p. And we would have gone higher, but nothing was supported until like the past 2 years. And so 720p looks great too. And I wanted a filmic look anyway.
Sure.
But that's still HD. And so I was like, well, the next films I would like to do after the project I'm about to tell you about, I'd like to shoot in red, which is a type of cinematic camera thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So that's very high def. But the thing I wanted to do next, I wanted to do a writer, which is Beaumont, a pop culture figure, which would be Ackerman. Then I want to do one about music. And so to that end, I got in touch with a few people. I have a musical lineage. I'm a musician myself, so I understand that whole DIY ethic. And I've taken that kind of approach with filmmaking. But my stepfather was in a band in the 60s. It's pretty well known. It's called the 13th Floor Elevators.
Oh,
and so
wow.
The lead singer is a guy named Rocky Erickson.
Yeah, Rocky Erickson. I used to do radio in Dallas, Texas, and then a little bit in Austin.
Oh yeah, well they're in the Texas Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen Return of the Living Dead, when James Karen is putting himself in the crematorium, he's going to cremate himself after he's becoming infected. They're playing "Burn the Flames," and that's Rocky Erickson and the Aliens, I think.
Now, another thing that's kind of interesting is when I was doing morning radio in Dallas at a radio. It was actually it was an edge station. It was like the first edge station where we played, supposedly cutting edge music, but it was like alternative music that we played. I was doing mornings there, and I had an intern by the name of gosh, I can't remember his name. It was Kevin McAllister. And he directed a documentary about Rocky Erickson. It's like a really well done documentary.
You're Gonna Miss Me, is that the one?
Yeah, that's one. You're Gonna Miss Me. Yeah, and I was like, I said, wait a minute, I was the guy that was in film. I was the one doing all this stuff, because I did a Pearl Jam documentary and a drama.
Well, what happened is I got discouraged from going into that because I've been in touch with some of the other members of the Elevators and stuff. Of course, my stepdad was easy to get to. Yeah. His name's Danny Thomas. He was the drummer, second drummer. And what happened is, I'm doing the interview. I actually did interview Tommy Hall, and he's a hard person to get. He lives in the Tenderloin area of San Francisco. Interviewed Tommy Hall briefly. He would not go on camera. So I've got my camera on and it's recording, and he was very paranoid, let's put it that way.
Wow.
And so I said, okay, I won't film you, but I did record the sound, and we were talking, and he talked a little about the Elevators. And then my stepfather gave a long, insightful interview, and then I was going to get Rocky, but that was at the resurgence of Rocky's career, which is pretty recently.
Yeah.
And I was working with some people about trying to get access to Rocky, but then they wanted to partner in on the film and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm a lone wolf, sorry. I'm not going to partner in anything. I want to control all the rights. I want to control everything about it because I don't want – everybody wants a piece of somebody, a property like that. Yeah. And I'm like, no. If I'm going to do all the risk and spend all the money, I'm not going to let you come in and say, but I want X in exchange for that. And I'm like, no, I ain't going to scratch your back, and you ain't going to scratch mine. So If you can't accept those terms, we have nothing to discuss.
That's smart.
And I'm kind of hard-nosed about it. You know, I'm not rude, but I'm like, this is it. That's the end of it. There's no more discussion. And then we did stop talking.
Yeah.
So that's probably not going to happen, because my thrust, knowing that movie was out there, was the elevator. Because Rocky is only an aspect of the elevators.
Sure.
He's not even the most important aspect of the elevators. But he has a compelling story. I'll grant that. Now, Rocky, I've talked to him on the phone several times. He's nice. That's fine. But his handlers, of course, are making him out to be the star, and they're going to do this biopicture and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't care about all that. I care about the elevators in their time. That's what I wanted. I wanted to discuss, you know, their connection with Kenny Rogers, and Leland Rogers was their engineer, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to talk about how Joplin was kind of a tangential figure with them at the time, and how they were actually pretty big headliners, you know. Quicksilver Messenger Service was opening for them, and all this kind of stuff. And then why it all fell apart and what happened to them after the fact. You know, we all know Rocky recovered, basically, and went on and everything. But that didn't happen to all of them. Some of them fell out of the music industry. Some stayed. Some plugged away and low. Some were murdered, like Stacy, the guitarist. So that's all very compelling to me, you know, and they had a huge impact on music now. And even bands that we all know about, like Pearl Jam and other people like this, cite them as an influence. You know, that rap band that loves them, that actually has an homage to their album, on their album to them. Oh, God, who is that, Sonny? It's Andre 3000. It's Outkast.
Oh, Outkast, that's right. Okay.
Big Elevator fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Julian Cope and people like that as well. So I was going to interview all those kinds of people and get the whole thing, you know, how it all sits in the popular culture, but they kind of rained on that. Which brings me to what I'm doing next, when you're ready.
Oh, what is that?
It's a film about fantastic art.
Oh, okay.
And what I want to do is trace the lineage of certain images, mainly Peter Bruegel the Elder and Hieronymus Bosch, into, from their time to now, and why those images have lingered in the collective unconscious. And to that end, we've interviewed about 30 artists, including Alex Gray and H.R. Giger and, you know, Ernst Fuchs. And there's a lot of people we've interviewed. A lot of them are mainly in Europe as well. But I'm planning on doing a big junket over to Australia to catch some of the Australian art scene, because there's a resurgence of this, what is called fantastic realism there. And then I've already done a lot in America. And one of the people who did in America a while back, but he's gotten very well known now, and that's Chris Cooksey. He's a friend of mine, Kuksi. And so I'm pleased with that. That's going to be a big long-term project that's going to eat up a lot of my time cinematically.
Well, it's so funny, because you and I seem to, you know, I can tell from just the posts and stuff that you do on Facebook, you and I have a lot in common, because I get into these spells where I get obsessive about like an artist or a musician, and I just have to be like a completist. I have to get everything about them, you know, and you know, and I just ordered this book on Richard Powers, the artwork he used to do for like the science fiction covers for, you know, the paperbacks and stuff, and and there's a great thing in there about, or maybe it's a website that got me going, where they were showing stuff, the artwork that was in the Museum of Modern Art, and they were saying, well, look at this person's, you know, fine art, but look at, you know, this guy who did, you know, science fiction, you know, album or science fiction covers, and actually XTC, Andy Partridge from XTC, that band, he did a whole album called Powers, and it was just all influenced by different covers and stuff that he had made. So I thought that was, you know, I think, you know, that would be kind of an interesting guy for a documentary. I said I'd like to find something, you know, like that. And you know, I always just wondered, like, when you're thinking of somebody, do you go on Google or YouTube and say, is there anything out there, and then just sort of feel like, okay,
usually stuff I've always been intrigued by. Yeah. That's what I've decided. It's usually stuff I've always been fascinated with, like, say, Bradbury's work or Ackerman's work or Beaumont's work. And then, because I'm going to transmit that, I hope, that energy and that enthusiasm into what I'm doing. Because even as I'm doing that, I'm not a fan of people. I'm not like a fanish kind of person.
Sure.
I'm not even a fan of my own work. But because I look at it very critically, and I try to always improve it. But there's people's work that I enjoy immensely. and I love what they do and what they're trying to say, and that I feel they connect to me. Like, for example, I think David Bowie is one of those kind of musicians for me, or, Beaumont, or, any number of other people that I've gotten to know, some of them, very well, and then other ones that I admire from afar, like something like Bowie, it's very difficult to get to. But I'm not like a slobbering fan, oh my God.
No.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't collect what they do.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that I don't really have probably too deep a knowledge of it sometimes. Yeah. But it does mean that mainly what I do is when I start thinking about, I would like to see something on them, then I go, what has been done on them? And so in that part of my casual research, I guess I'd call it, is I see if there's a movie about them or something, or I see if there's, a book on them.
Yeah.
And if there is, I'll read it, or I'll consume it, or I'll look at it, or whatever, or listen to interviews. And then it starts dawning on me that this isn't all of it, though. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I'll dig in and I'll go, they're not, something is missing, or this is very facile, it's just right on the top. And I want to get into the meat of it. And that's what I think you're commenting about, the way our films work, is we get into the grist of the human being behind it.
Right.
And, what compelled them to be the way they are, and then what compelled this projection that they're putting up, which we all do to some degree, but these are more writ large projections. And I think that most documentarians are kind of afraid to do that. For example, Ken Russell is good at things, but he's not good at documentaries about people, I don't think. He's good at documentaries about things, epochs, subjects, like jazz or basketball, or, I mean, whatever that one was, baseball, or the Civil War. He does these things that are kind of sprawling and brings an interpersonal element.
You're talking about Ken.
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns. I thought you said Ken Russell. I was like, Ken Russell.
No. I like Ken Russell. It'd be interesting to do a documentary on. I don't know if anybody's done one.
Yeah. Let me get this in real quick. I want everyone to go and check out your website, JSony. Is it JSony? Is that how you pronounce it, or JSony?
JSony, yeah.
JSony. JASUNNI.com. And you can look at your catalog there and look at some of the films and some of the projects you're working on. I'd really want people to go there and seek this out, and because I really do believe these documentaries have a different take than a normal documentary. I get a feeling of it's personal. It's in there. It sort of delves into places that I don't think you're going to see on any other kind of, certainly, any kind of mainstream, biography channel or anything like that. This is just something that's kind of, you can watch it, and it's, I think I'm going to say you're a filmmaker or a documentarian that I feel is like those situations where you have a favorite band, like, you're like, oh man, that's my favorite band, and then they become successful, and you go, you know what, I knew them back then, I'm not that. You're the kind of filmmaker that somebody could come along and say, yes, I watched this documentary and I dug it, and I'm going to watch this documentary. I have no idea what the subject is about, but because Jason V. Brock is involved in it, I know I'm going to get something out of it because of his take. And that's the way I sort of look at it. And I'd really like everyone to try to go to jasuni.com, JASUNI.com. Also, these are available on Amazon.com as well. So I think
Amazon.com. Yeah, the two N's in that, JASUNNI.com. But the thing is, I want to tell you, that's actually happened to me. I was at a KillerCon, and Brian Keene, the writer, came up to me and said, I want to shake your hand. And I said, well, that's strange. I said, why? And because he said that, kind of what you just said, that I was keeping these guys out there in a way with these films and stuff like that, and he appreciated that. And I appreciated him acknowledging it. And I said, well, that's cool. I think that's awesome, that he got so much out of this kind of thing and seeing these guys be back in the public eye because they're important.
You're talking about Brian Keene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is funny because I did a documentary on him. This is like some years back. I shot a video of him and Michael Oliveri and Jeff Cooper and Michael. I can't remember Michael. Hayek. I think that's. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But they did a book called 4x4, and they were on tour, and I did this just a little documentary, like just interviewing each one of them, and that was like a really successful documentary for me. And it's really great because those guys, each one of them had their own, fan base, and so that documentary I did, and I was the only distributor on it, and I was just doing it as sort of an experiment, but everybody had their own fan base, so everybody wanted that documentary for, they wanted that tape for their own special purpose, even though it was like 4 different authors. So it was a really successful, thing. So that's kind of cool that, and I agree with him. You go to his website and read, go to his blogs and stuff. Brian is so into, a lot of people, they don't really care about the shoulders of the people they're standing on. But Brian, you can tell he like looks at these guys, and he still reads stuff from those guys. So it's like it's really cool that that he acknowledged that you are keeping their flame. I mean, I guess trying to keep So I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to do to the pay it forward aspect, And that's what I try to do too with younger writers or younger filmmakers that come up to me. I want to help them out. And the first thing I do is I set their expectations very hard, because having been there and done it, it's not easy.
Right.
To amass all of it, travel all over the world doing it. It's real expensive. There's no guarantee it'll pay out, which, we're still waiting to earn back all the money that we shelled out. But in the long run, it's not about how much money you make or how much money you're paid, although that's important. It's about the legacy you leave behind in the work, as I call it with a capital W,
right,
that you do. And that is to be as good a person as you can, and to try to pay as much as you got out of things, pay that forward as you can, and also then hopefully expose more people to things you think that they will like and enjoy, and shed light on these other people that they fall into obscurity. You know what I mean? And that's a shame, because they need to be there and exposed.
Yeah.
So this guy said I should go on Heinlein.
Yeah.
And I think that is a can of worms.
Wow.
Heinlein is a rather controversial figure.
Yeah.
And there are some pretty unsavory things that went on there.
Yeah.
That I know of, and I would be like loath to put that out, because my point is, even though I don't want it to be muckraking, I also don't want it to be fluff. And so I would have to address these things to some degree. I'd have to say this was brought up to our attention. I'd want people to go on camera about that, and I don't think some of them will.
That has got to be something tough. I would imagine there's got to be situations just like that where you go to somebody and you say, okay, I want to talk, I want to interview you about this. And they're like, you know what? I ain't got nothing good to say. It's like, what, like
that happened to me. That happened to me with Robert Williams.
Oh,
I was interviewing Robert Williams, a painter, and the camera was rolling, and he was going to bring up something. And I said, well, I won't share it. He says, well, I don't believe you. Cut the camera off. I said, okay. So I cut it off. He discussed it. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but I could see why he would not want that getting out.
Yeah.
And so, I wouldn't have done it. He didn't know that, and that's fair enough. So, you got to accommodate people, because everybody's still human. And, yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, I think Dan O'Bannon, I would like to maybe do something on one day.
Well, that would be a good subject.
No, I interviewed a lot of people about Dan, actually, and he was a good friend of mine and Sonny's, and his wife Diane is still a good friend. In fact, she's promoting a book that just came out that he wrote and was co-written with Matt Lohr, Lohr, called Dan O'Bannon's Guide to Screenplay Structure. And just came out, really interesting to read. I read it and reviewed it for Nameless, which is this biannual digest I'm putting out.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating thing, because he was very insightful.
I think he was an interesting guy, and I've seen that book, and I've thought about picking that up and seeing.
Don't hesitate to get it.
Now, you mentioned Mark Zicree earlier. I know he and his wife are into mentoring.
Elaine.
Do what?
Her name's Elaine.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know they're interested in mentoring and helping people. Is that something that you see yourself, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I'd like to do that, because Mark actually mentored us a little bit. Not only was he encouraging, but we attended a couple of his mentorship workshops down in L.A., and they're very interesting and helpful, because he brings a wide swath of people that he attracts, and he's so enthusiastic and insightful and knowledgeable. And Mark is very down to earth. That's one thing I admire about him a lot, is that, and Elaine is too, they're both really approachable and accessible. And that's one thing you'll find about these guys, like Bradbury and Matheson and Nolan and Johnson. These people, you think they're iconic, right?
Yeah.
They are, Harryhausen, but they're very eminently approachable because they came up from fandom. You know, they remember what it's like being the neophyte, trying to find your way.
Yeah.
Beaumont was very much like this, too. And so I want to never be, as we become more and more professional, you know, and we're doing this more and more as our living, which is happening slowly, I never want somebody to think that I'm unapproachable or a jerk or horrible. And I just don't think there's any room for that. And people that are like that, it's bad. You know, I'm on this Brian King thing all of a sudden. But King, I was reading this blog post he put up about a lecture he did.
Oh, yeah, I just read that. I read that last night.
Yeah, it's quite a good thing he wrote.
Yeah.
And he brings up some good points and things that I've said and posted on my Facebook account because I'm very accessible on Facebook, as you know, and I say some pretty out there things sometimes that not everybody agrees with about religion and politics.
Sure.
But also about writing, you know, and I've had people get into discussions and this kind of thing about writing and politics and moving back and forth. And I think what Ken wrote, which I hope to repose, is very effective because I think people are laboring under this assumption that once you hit a certain plateau, that's it. You can just cash checks or,
right.
You know, Stephen King Jr. It ain't going to happen for 99.999999998% of them.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
so,
to sort of summarize what Keene was saying in the lecture is that, you know,
I think the best thing I've ever read of his that he's written.
Oh, I know, me too.
That's not an insult. I mean, it's very well done and
moving
in places. It was.
I can't wait until his nonfiction work starts. You know, because I was reading it last night and it just flowed, and it was about like it was like, how do you make a living as a writer, or am I making a living as a writer? What does it take to make a living as a writer? And I think it works for anybody. It's like if you want to be a filmmaker or a painter, you know, it's like, how can I do what my soul wants to do, and how can I make a living doing that? And I know a lot of people, they say...
I have a theory called multiple revenue streams.
Oh, yeah?
And what you have to do, as I can touch on it a little bit, you've got to be willing and able to do more than one thing. Mm-hmm. You know, like for us, we publish books and this journal, and we also, you know, do films, and we write, and we edit, and you have to be able to do... I do graphic design work. We have to do all these things.
It's like
Renaissance. Keep the ball well. We also do computer consulting, you know, and that kind of thing. So we do all of these things to make the whole enterprise work. But the trade-off is we're able to work from our home. Yeah. You know, we're not loaded with money by any means, but, you know, we make our bills.
Sure.
And we're starting to be able to put a little bit away. And so, but we're mainly turning whatever we could back into the projects to get them out because we're building our catalog.
Wow.
So by the end of next year, we're going to have like at least 4 movies.
Oh, that's great.
We're going to have probably 20 books of our own and journals and things, because I've done anthologies and this kind of stuff as well. And it's, you know, once you get the catalog, then you can kind of relax a little bit, just promote what you have and work at things on a slower pace. Well, and that's how you have to think of it as a business long term.
I think you guys are doing it the smart way. You know, you've got all the rights. The products are yours. You can have a back catalog that you can, you know, rejuvenate and, you know, mine from for other projects. I mean, you know, it's like a big web that you guys have sort of created out of projects that you love. And the thing is like if say one of the projects, you know, doesn't make money, it's kind of okay because you did the best product you could for a subject that you loved, and you know, and maybe a few months later is when that reward financially will come in. I mean, you know, so I always think that's
exactly true.
Yeah, and
we do the highest quality we can, and it's pretty damn high quality usually. And that means sometimes there are things that are hiccups that you can't avoid.
Well,
but
I like that
we iron most of that out, and our product is like 99% better than anything else out there.
Well,
and it's more thorough as well, and better done and better realized. And like if you look at our books, they're better designed. They look good. They feel good in your hand. The DVDs, we put as many extras and things as we can to cram in there.
That's great.
Now, we do hold a little bit back because we plan on eventually reissuing them maybe in Blu-ray and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a ways. And then we got to have some things that were not part of the original package that we can, you know, insert and show people because we'll have more room for one thing. You know, we just couldn't put everything on the DVDs, even though they're dual layered. But
Jason, if you or Sonny have any cool projects coming up in the future, you are by all means welcome on the show. Jason V. Brock is one of my favorite people. He's a Facebook friend, and you know, I think he's probably maxed out on friends. But if you can, if you want to try to,
true. I have a fan page now because that's
Well, very, very good. You know, I'm a fan of your wife, actually, because there was a time where there was a person that was just...
She's awesome.
Yeah, she just... There was this woman that went crazy on Facebook and started saying these horrible things about me. It was just like, I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. She was just saying these horrible, horrible things about me on her own page. And then, you know, your wife wrote me this message and says, hey, you know what? This woman's a train wreck. Don't even worry about her, you know? So, I mean, I was like all petrified because what's going to happen, you know? And Sonny came and rescued me, you know, from that. So I thought, all right, she's going to be my friend for life. So, together they form a company called J Sunny. It's JASUNNI.com. Go to their page, look at their work, look at the films they've got going on. I highly recommend the Charles Beaumont. Even if you don't know anything about the Twilight Zone, or you can learn life lessons in these documentaries, and the AckerMonster Chronicles, which is a big hit right now. I can't scroll down my feed without seeing some mention or some review of either one of these films.
People have got crazy over that. It's pretty weird.
Yeah,
good though.
When you had the screenings that you've had, I mean, I have so many friends that have gone to that, so my feed was just nuts that weekend. You know, where it was just like everybody's.
We had a special screening at LostCon. Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to get something going at down in. I know that John Landis. We sent John Landis a copy of the screener, and I know from Joe Mo mentioned on a thread that John liked the movie a lot. So I'm planning on asking him and some other people to come to wherever we get lined up in LA, because I want to do another big screening there. I'm not sure where it's going to be yet, but we've got some irons in the fire there. So once I get that going, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know when you get that going. I would love to hear that. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has just been really a great conversation. So just anytime you got something going on, just get back with us.
Sounds good.
Thanks for being on the show, man.
All right, thanks, Jerry.